Hello. I want to point out a few things quickly here about my case with the DMT stuff. I don't really need to do all this to point out that that they were in the wrong and they shouldn't have done what they did, and I wasn't doing anything wrong. In fact, I was doing something good, and that they way overstepped their boundaries. And frankly, they acted like they were performing law enforcement duties, but they're not. That's not really what was going on. So just, I'm not looking for revenge. And I already agreed not to challenge the ruling and everything. That's not what I'm up to here. I'm just documenting my experience because it was very harmful and it was very wrong and it goes against productive society. And that's what they're supposed to be doing, is protecting progress and productive society. So first, I'll start just by reiterating that a SWAT team, last year in December, a SWAT team arrested me in my own home, in this house, because I received a package of Mimosa hostilis root bark powder that I bought on the clear web, on the normal internet, with normal money. And MHRB contains trace amounts of dimethyltryptamine, but so does pretty much every living being on this planet. Most plants and animals that haven't been that haven't had that nutrient stripped from their systems contain levels of dimethyltryptamine. It's just present in life on Earth. And Mimosa hostilis root bark happens to contain a higher percentage of it than some of the other plants. And another plant that does is the acacia plant, which is often associated with ketamine synthesis. And my understanding is that's because it contains dimethyltryptamine. And when you do an acid-base salt extraction from an aqueous solution and using a solvent, which in many cases they use cyclohexane, but I was using naphtha, then you end up with, they classify it as an R-cyclohexylamine, but it's just a ketonic amine. It's any amine, which means tryptamines, and this information is obscured on the internet, but a ketone is a double bonded oxygen with an amine, which means that it just usually, like for example, a tryptamine bonded through an aqueous salt solution. It's as simple as that, and there's a lot of misinformation on the internet about it, and a lot of stuff that isn't readily available, basically. My understanding is that it's due to the pharmaceutical industry wanting to be able to patent certain naturally occurring chemicals and be able to make money off of them, because dimethyltryptamine and its corresponding ketonic format are very important for natural life functions, especially brain function. And I already have been diagnosed and dealing with mental illness for a very long time, and I happen to understand that part of it is due to my circumcision. That's where the term schizophrenia comes from, is a split in the frenulum, and that my diagnosis is depression, which is they depress the penis before they cause a borderline, resulting in a bipolar disorder. And obviously other factors have contributed to this issue, but what doesn't help is being put on a bunch of pharmaceuticals that make it all worse, and then finding out that they were doing the opposite of what I needed, and that I needed more of this nutrient in my body, and that the medications they were giving me were preventing this nutrient from being processed from my body, and that a lot of FDA things like processed foods and stuff often might even have this chemical processed out of it, but that raw foods are supposed to naturally contain it as well. And that these tryptamine substances, these substances that are considered psychedelic, are often naturally occurring simply because they're high in this one particular nutrient. And that, for example, psilocybin and lysergamide and stuff like that are all basically just dimethyltryptamine molecules with different types of salt compounds attached to them, and that there's absolutely no reason that these things should be illegal. at all, period. And that the main issue is actually just like basically food prep and storage and spoiling, and like through extraction processes, if someone isn't you know, doing it in a skilled manner, it can be potentially harmful due to, for the example, the use of sodium hydroxide. But that's just a soap product that's very caustic if it makes contact with your skin. And what's it called? Ascorbic acid isn't really that dangerous. And neither is naphtha, as long as you're not lighting it on fire in a place that it shouldn't be on fire. And I was ordering the MHRB previously, before Trump was elected. And I had stopped because I had gotten to a point in my recovery where I felt like I didn't need it as much. But I was ordering the MHRB and extracting it myself at home because I found out that I really needed to recover from trauma. For example, a bone graft surgery that I had on my hand, which was caused by the state of Maryland mishandling me while I was unjustly incarcerated for something that should have been considered self-defense. However, I believe that they were trying to cover up their involvement in the cocaine trade. And it's a very serious situation because I haven't been trying to expose people inherently of I think that, for example, even cocaine shouldn't be illegal. I'm not a cocaine user. I did use it a few times when I was entrapped by Ksenia Krugliakova, who eventually turned on me. But it's become very apparent now that that was a whole operation designed to put me in harm's way. But my point is that other things, I don't think any of these plant medicines should be illegal. And I think the only reason they are is because that people don't want to share the wealth as it is, which is ironic because Virginia is a Commonwealth state. But anyway, yeah, there are potential dangers, but I would argue that it's probably more dangerous driving to work every day than it is doing, for example, the extraction I was doing. Not that there aren't dangers, definitely if you get lye in your eyeballs, that can be a problem. But it's not like I didn't take chemistry. It's not like I wasn't a really good student in high school and that my mental illness just got in the way of my schoolwork later on. But it's not like I'm not still smart. I just have a harder time coping with triggers than I used to. But I've done a lot of work on that. And the extractions I was doing with the dimethyltryptamine were very effective for me. I would usually smoke the product, but in very reasonable amounts. And it would process out of my system very quickly. Whereas now the ketamine prescription that I'm on, I have to wait 6 hours before I can operate a motor vehicle. Whereas with dimethyltryptamine, when smoked, it's a more quick onset. And then, and once again, it becomes a key. You could have considered potentially what I was I was potentially synthesizing ketamine, but there's an initiative 80. There was an initiative. It's still there. Initiative 81 in DC, which is a federal initiative. So it shouldn't just be in regards to DC. And it's decriminalizing all prosecutions, deprioritizing all prosecutions on psychedelic substances. And there was a previous initiative, 71, which decriminalized cannabis. And there are dispensaries in Virginia. There are cannabis dispensaries in Virginia, even though on the federal level it's still considered illegal. And yet they chose to hold a package that I had ordered because Sean Lang, who was my new friend in a circle of friends that I had for a while, I played a game of Call of Duty with him, and I thought we were going to be good friends, and then he got killed with what was probably an assault rifle with his wife. And I understand there was more to it on his side, but that traumatized me. And so I ordered the MHRB again, and my package got held at customs because it was going from Mexico to Germany and then back over here. So I ordered another package, and it came from Maryland, and I got that one, and I started the extraction again. And once again, only reason I even knew about this is because you could buy psychedelics in DC. You could go in and show them your driver's license, which means that it's, it's being federally cleared. And then purchase, you could purchase psilocybin mushrooms. You could purchase, and then what I was interested in more so, because I had tried the psilocybin mushrooms, but they at some point made my depression worse, not better. I think it was probably just the strains and the way they were grown and everything like that. Probably was not what I needed. But the dimethyltryptamine was helping. I was able to obtain both a vaporizer multiple times and what's it called, and a powder once. But the problem is that I wasn't so sure about the ethics is one issue of the sourcing, because I had no context. There wasn't really any transparency. And then more so, the cost, was the cost, because I don't have an income, because it's very difficult for me to make income, because I'm basically blacklisted from the music industry, first of all. And second of all, it's very difficult for me to get a job where people actually understand my mindset. I'm not just mentally ill, I'm gifted. And sometimes people don't understand that, and they tend to not show me the proper respect or not care. Excuse me, I farted. And also I had a felony from what should have been self-defense in Maryland against someone who was obviously corrupt as hell and was clearly setting me up and threatening me, and they decided to take her side because I think the police were serving her cocaine, which is addictive. And once again, if it's prepared properly, what I learned through this process is that pretty much all of these plant medicines, when prepared properly, are extremely safe and shouldn't be particularly addictive at all. In the sense of actually they're anti-addictive. The dimethyltryptamine allowed me to get off of nicotine addiction. And once again, even with nicotine, I don't think nicotine itself in low doses grown organically is supposed to be terribly addictive. It shares properties with some other nutrients that humans need. But the tobacco products, especially in America, I don't know about other places, but they're not really tobacco products. They're just a formulation of different chemicals that are not really inherent to the original product. Anyway, the point is that the dimethyltryptamine was apparently organically sourced from, and was, endorsed by whatever Mexican National Council of Tradition was associated with it. Hopefully that wasn't a lie. But the point is that I had ordered, one of my packages got held at customs, but another one came to me. And my point here is that if I can order this stuff on the regular internet and use regular money, and there's a federal decriminalization initiative, then as a citizen, it's not my job to assume the worst. It's not my job to be like, oh, well, I just shouldn't order it. No, you're letting me order it. That means with this initiative in place, and with this context of how we got here, you're using the last initiative to run a business. You even have a dispensary in front of the probation office you made me go to. By the way, who's to say cannabis doesn't contain dimethyltryptamine? Did you ever think about that? I'm just saying, I'm not trying to get you shut down or anything, but maybe you should consider it. If you're going to be hypocritical, if you really think it's such an issue, maybe you should consider taking a bow and a seat. Anyway, but if you want to understand where I'm coming from too, that's fine. I'm not asking for everything to stop, period, because I support the momentum in the right direction. I just think that when there's a hypocritical effort of overreaction, which put my life at risk and seriously harmed my mental health, that you should take responsibility for that. It doesn't have to be legal responsibility, because obviously the law doesn't really factor much into this, considering that you picked and choose what to enforce. So you can say it's illegal, but this isn't about what's legal and illegal, because the system is corrupt. What it's about is what's right and wrong, and what's effective and what's ineffective. And I'm not trying to put all law enforcement officers down or say that your job isn't real. But what I am saying is that when it's not done with all these factors in mind, you're actually just a criminal. If you're not actually doing the right thing, like the definition of a criminal is someone who's causing harm to, society, basically, mostly, or just in general, just objectively overall, not just society, but like people as a whole. Like, and that's not what I was doing. And if you're arguing otherwise because you started ketamine clinics in the area seemingly after I was doing my extractions, possibly even using my efforts as an initiative to get them established, and that you just want to quote unquote eliminate me as competition, I don't think that's a valid, viewpoint necessarily, because I wasn't competition. I'm an independent researcher who, actually figured out how to do something really important, and developed my own version of it. And it was safe. And the only problem that was coming from it was you people being harmful to me about it. That's really the issue. It was working for me very well. And I'm appreciative for the prescription and everything, but, I don't think the way we got there was appropriate. So anyway, what I'm getting at is that there was a SWAT team that arrested me. And damn it, I accidentally separated the video. Now I'm going to have to edit it together. I could have just used the front-facing camera. I didn't have to hold my phone that way. Anyway, this is all the paperwork that I was able to obtain from the court. And there was more at some point, like when their initial arrest occurred. First thing I want to point out is they are claiming, by the way, they say a controlled delivery was executed. Do you know what that means? That means they held the package and they gave it to me. So instead of sending me a letter that says, hey, this substance is illegal and we don't want you to do this anymore. And then me just being able to go, oh, okay, fine, I'll figure out another way. They decided to hold the package and set me up. They delivered it to me. That's what they mean by a controlled delivery. And then it says, accepted a package containing 420 grams of DMT. That is factually incorrect. The Mimosa hostilis plant, I received 420 grams of Mimosa hostilis root bark, in which about 1% of that would be dimethyltryptamine. So that means 4.2 grams of dimethyltryptamine. So, and that brings into question the validity of these lab tests, because, they came to the house saying that they lab tested it. And they said, oh, also look. Where is it? Oh, by the way, that's the officer associated with this. And they took a bunch of pictures in the house, and they had body cam footage, apparently. And, I wasn't able to obtain any of that, so I think I'm going to have to subpoena the Deuces Take'em, the officer. And once again, I'm not trying to put people on blast here. I'm just trying to explain that this is wrong. Search warrants, blah, 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 this, that, and the open. They said package of DMT was opened. Okay, well, they're not differentiating between the two different packages that I had obtained another package already. Yeah, that package was open, but what they're making it sound like is that they delivered this to me and I immediately got into it. When what actually happened is I opened the outside packaging, realized what was inside, was confused because I'd already received a refund for this package, and I went downstairs. I didn't open the seal of the package. I opened the outer packaging, and then I went downstairs to talk to my dad about it because I was like, I think I need to tell the people who sent this to me that I received it, because they gave me a refund. And then a SWAT team came into my house. Anyway, they say chemicals and other paraphernalia. Yeah, okay, I was extracting the DMT. I'm not denying that. Yeah, of course, I told them the websites I obtained them from because they're fucking ClearNet websites. You people are the ones who are supposed to be monitoring that. You're not supposed to, and this is police entrapment, by the way. In fact, I have reason to believe that the police themselves are running the websites and the deliveries. admitted, explained. I didn't manufacture the fucking DMT crystals. Do you know who manufactured the DMT crystals? God, bitch. Excuse my language. The fucking plant manufactured the DMT crystals, accusing me of being fucking of the earth. Yeah, I am. My name's Alec Clark Stewart. Yeah, I'm the earth. So you're criminally charging the earth and all its life forms. Anyway, it's a very important distinction. You might think that's silly, but I did not manufacture any DMT crystals. All I did was I performed an acid-base extraction, which means that I put the plant material in a glass jar, just like this one. That's hemp, by the way. I put it in a glass jar, just like that. And I used, which one did I do first? Now I have to remember. It's been a long time since I've done it now. Can't remember if it was the acid. Well, I have a copy of it. Long story short, the process involves breaking down the cell walls. I think it was the acid first, right? Yeah, breaking down the cell walls, bringing the pH to a very acidic level so that, and putting it in like slightly heated water so that the fucking cell walls break open and the dimethyltryptamine gets into the water. And because you rehydrate the substance, the Mimosa hostilis. And then, what is it? Then I would add salt so that the dimethyltryptamine had a chance to ionically bond with the salt, which now I know is like basically in an aqueous solution would be creating a ketonic bond as well. And it would be basically ketamine at that point. And then using a basic additive to raise the pH very high so that it would become, so that the dimethyltryptamine would become hydrophilic, right? So that when I add the solvent, which in this case was naphtha, but apparently you can also use cyclohexane, that the dimethyltryptamine molecule would be hydrophilic and it would go into the solvent, and then I would use a plunger and remove the solvent and put it in a glass container and put it in the freezer. And then it would supersaturate and there would be crystals, the dimethyltryptamine crystals, which would form on the glass. And that's all it was, is I opened up the cell walls and then I managed to get the nutrient, which is what I was after, to form in a glass. And then I'd pour all the naphtha out, and then I'd put a fan to blow and evaporate the rest of the naphtha. So there's no caustic chemicals, there's no harmful chemicals in the product. It's just pure dimethyltryptamine, potentially in a ketonic format, which is a very, very helpful medicine. It's basically the foundation of of actually all medicine. My attorney even said to the judge, even doctors can't use DMT. Well, that's not true. I understand that he was trying to, he did explain some of it correctly, and that's important. And that I understand that if we had fought this charge, legitimately fought it, that everyone involved would have just tried to cover their ass and they would have gotten really hostile, way more hostile than they already were with me. Anyway, so point being is it didn't contain 420 grams of DMT, and why aren't you bringing up the other package? There were 2 packages. I already had one, and you're making it sound like it was one package. And you gave me 2 different felony charges, 1 for each package. That doesn't make sense. It's the same thing. Look, 2 different fucking charges at once. Oh, and also look, they said at first it was to manufacture and distribute, which is absolute fucking bullshit. First of all, it's not possible to manufacture DMT in the sense that that was done. How many times do I have to reiterate? The plant fucking manufactured it. And no, I don't mean like a bunch of humans running around in a metal foundry. I mean the actual fucking plant life. It's biology. Anyway, then I bonded out, which I probably shouldn't have needed to do. But another thing that I really, really, really want to point out here, okay, a few things actually. So yeah, instead of dropping the charges, by the way, they weren't supposed to do this in the first place, is what I'm saying about the initiative. Instead of dropping the charges, they changed them from manufacturing and intent to distribute to 2 different possession charges. What is that bullshit? Just admit you were wrong. You're not wrong that I ordered it and that I was extracting it, but you're wrong about everything else, basically. You know, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt, if you will. But anyway, certificate of analysis verification. What was the other thing I was going to point something else out. I can't remember. Anyway, they said 420 grams of powder found to contain dimethyltryptamine. Once again, pretty much all raw plant material on this planet that hasn't been grown in some horrific setting should contain dimethyltryptamine. And what is this 420 found to contain? Okay, found to contain how much dimethyltryptamine? And they didn't say that. So whoever did this analysis obviously wasn't very thorough or specific, and they exaggerated the amount of dimethyltryptamine in this plant matter. And like I said, why don't you go do some tests on your cannabis and see what you find? You know, the cannabis that you're selling to people in the fucking dispensaries and probably on the streets too, because what I'm realizing is that the police aren't necessarily always doing the right thing. Let's just put it that way. They're not always on the right side of the law. Anyway, so, oh yeah, and then the other thing, so nolo contendere, yeah, sure, okay, I get it. You people are going to try to kill me, which is what you're already doing, and that if I didn't take this plea, that you were just going to straight up harass the actual fuck out of me, and probably torture me, which, not that you haven't been already, but that I'm aware it was terrorism. I know that. I know it was police entrapment, and I know there was a conspiracy to commit murder, because you know why? I had years of training. I had years of information about some of the operations that were going on. By the way, they took some Vault 7 CIA files that I'd printed out, and someone claimed to be FBI. I don't see any record of that in here. Anyway, going through more of this stuff, I need to keep track of it and make sure I don't put it all out of order and everything. Not that it matters that much, but need to take these papers, move them, then do this. And I'm sorry if you were involved in this case and it hurts to hear me explain it like this, but you have to understand where I'm coming from here. I wasn't doing anything wrong. I was suffering because of mistakes that you people are making. And I was just trying to solve this problem on my own, as I should, as any good man should. And I was being allowed to do it for a period of time, and then someone changed their mind after Trump got elected, apparently. And you know Trump has beef with Mexico, and the plant was coming from Mexico. It's not that hard to figure out what happened. You know, he killed Mac Miller, probably. And, you know, they also took my computer away from me for a period of time. See, this is, yeah, and half of the operation was probably just to get me to stop making music. Let's see. Oh yeah, so also what I wanted to point out, which I'll have to go back through it because I didn't see it. It was an Ackerman plea, is that what it's called? You know that plea was designed for bank robbers, right? You know, I wasn't the one who robbed anyone. You guys were the people who robbed me. And so basically, and you were the ones who possessed the DMT before you gave it to me. So how come you guys didn't get charged with DMT possession? Because you're law enforcement? Because you get paid, right? Because you get a paycheck, right? And you all have guns, and you can just say that's not how it works, right? So hypocrisy, basically. Because when you actually break it down to the real conditions at hand, just because you passed some classes, and you know you get paid, and people are going to back you up because it's a gang, because the police are a gang. You know, that doesn't necessarily mean that A, you know anything more than I do about this substance, that you have any real reason to be handling it instead of me, other than the fact that you're making money off of it. And you don't seem to have my best interests in mind, so I don't really see any real reason that you should have that privilege instead of me, other than just straight up corruption. And I've basically been a saint my whole life. I'm not saying I haven't made mistakes. But you can hardly blame me when I thought for a very long time that my circumcision was not the basis of a lot of my issues and that it was a good thing, instead of realizing that that was part of the medical, psyop, I guess. So while we're looking for the Ackerman plea thing, because it was armed robbery, you people did commit armed robbery against me. There it is, Alford plea. Oh, and then they changed it to no contest. He explained an Alford plea to me in a slightly differently than it actually was. But anyway, once again, I'm not trying to get people in trouble, quote unquote. I'm trying to clarify this situation because it has impacted me to an extreme degree after a long series of being impacted negatively by the medical field and the law enforcement industry. And all I've been trying to do is cooperate, and then where possible, live my life to the fullest. And what I'd like to point out is that there is no SWAT warrant, no grand jury involved in this paperwork. That is the main point that I'm pointing out here. And it's possible that there is more paperwork somewhere, because there was other papers involved in the actual arrest process. And I don't see the original lab report. They came to the house with a lab report saying that they tested the package, except the package wasn't opened. It wasn't opened. There were two packages, and that's not the one they said they tested. They said they tested the one that was held at customs and that it was not opened. You know what was opened is the cardboard, not the actual bag. They even pointed that out, that it was sealed. And after that, they said that it had been opened. So they're misrepresenting the facts. And like I said, they came to the door with a lab test, but not like a full one, just that they said, oh, we tested it and it contained DMT. Okay, so you tested it and then you packaged it back up all nice and tidy and sent it to me again? Why didn't you just say, hey, we held this package at customs and we think it contains something illegal that we don't want you to have. Sorry about that. I already got my money back. But why didn't you just say sorry about that? Oh, because I ordered another package. Okay, why did you allow that? Why are you allowing that? And then blaming me. Why are you not, if it's such a big deal, why are you not arresting? Why are you not even arresting necessarily? Why aren't you just making it unavailable to me? That's what your job is. So you didn't do your job and then you tried to cover it up by blaming me. I had every reason to believe that what I was doing was fine. And you guys came in with a SWAT team and you took a bunch of pictures of my house like it was a murder scene. There's no pictures in here. And what about all the body cam footage? How come no one knows where that is? So anyway, the point is that at some point I will probably be submitting a subpoena deuces tecum to this officer. And if that doesn't result in anything particular, then I will find more ways to ask questions. And once again, this isn't about fighting the case. I already know this is a corrupt case. I can't do anything about that. I can't appeal the decision. And basically what they said is more probation, same period of time, and do 100 hours of community service. Okay, I'm basically done with the community service already. I did and I was going to do community service anyway, of my own volition, at the Smithsonian in the garden. So you guys just made it seem like it was your idea. Anyway, and this is the laptop they took, by the way, and it had all of my master tracks. It had all of my master tracks on it for all of my music. If you know anything about the music industry, you know exactly what that means. So I had to give it all away for free just to make sure, try to distribute copies to other people, just so that if they tried to sell it to a record company or something, that there's a chance that someone else would have a copy and be able to dispute it, or at least that it would be obvious that something happened. You know, what they were supposed to be doing is helping me with my music career. That's one of the things they were supposed to be doing. Another thing they should have been doing is checking in on me and seeing to make sure that I wasn't having too much trouble with the extraction process and making sure that I wasn't selling it to anyone that they don't approve of without paying proper dues to the state. product testing and purity would have been nice if they came over and smoked some of it with me and said, yeah, this seems fine. Since PJ said he knows a thing or two about cooking, and he's one of the detectives. He said that on camera too. And he's the one that was all quote unquote knowledgeable about the process. It seems to me that you people should have been using your powers for good, not evil. It's an abuse of power. And it's, like I said, it's hypocritical. And it goes against the basis of the foundation of the issue in the first place. I wasn't selling it to make money. There were a couple times that I gave it away. And then one time I gave it away to someone who had a heroin addiction that I was trying to help them get off of. I'm not their fucking doctor, but they were in a group of people that I kind of had, you kind of have to be honest with some people on a low level and explain what you're doing, or else you run the risk of like, I don't know how to explain it. Anyone who's been in a remotely similar situation to me would know exactly what I'm talking about. But I wasn't making a business out of it. I considered it briefly, and I was like, no, that I would have to do so much legal work to actually establish a business at some point that I might as well just wait until they actually make more progress on the decriminalization and legalization before I even think about it. And yeah, I know people go to school for this shit. This is the thing. The only difference between what I was doing and what other people are doing, the main difference is that they went to school for it, but I also went to school for the level of chemistry that was involved. I went to school for that. I should have been authorized. Like, if that's the authorization level, I completed enough education to that degree to perform that sort of experiment. And school isn't always such a good measurement of someone being good at something or understanding what it's supposed to be about. So basically what it comes down to is that people paid money. Like, yeah, okay, so even if you did legitimately do well in school and you actually do understand it, okay, so did I to a degree necessary to complete it safely and effectively. And the main difference is that you paid someone a bunch of money to protect you. Like, it's gang shit. That's what it comes down to. You paid your gang dues. Well, guess what? I also paid a bunch of money to the university system. I also paid a bunch of money to the fucking medical industry. And not only did I pay my dues in other ways, but my point is that you people are just being greedy and selfish and gatekeeping. And that's what it comes down to. There was no actual legitimate reason, like safety hazard on my end, to actually have stopped me. You didn't do any fucking proper due diligence. And you apparently don't know what the fuck, you either don't know what the substance is in the first place, or you do and you intentionally, used it to attack me. Because your lab report obviously is not very thorough, and you don't seem to be aware that this is a naturally occurring substance in most plant life, period. And humans generate it in their brains, or wherever the fuck it actually comes from. Humans generate it on a certain level as well. So if you're going to prosecute like this just means that you can just basically, attack anyone for anything with a SWAT team. That's what it comes down to. And that's kind of messed up. And I want the pictures, and I want the body cam footage, and I want the SWAT warrant. And it gets worse because I had the formula for what I was doing. I had it written down in a lab notebook. And while they gave me my laptop back, and I've rewritten it since then from memory, just out of pure desire to keep track of my work, I haven't been doing the extraction since then. But they kept the lab notebook after the plea deal was taken. The reason they gave my phone back, not this one, but another phone. This one. Wait, no, was it that one? Yeah, that one. And they gave my computer back. Those were listed as evidence. They gave the phone back almost right away, and they gave the computer back after the plea deal was taken, like 9 months in. And yet they're claiming that they need the lab notebook as evidence in the case. And even though they prosecuted on, or they claimed that the actual bags of Mimosa hostilis root bark were deemed illegal. Okay, if you want to, I know that what you're doing is wrong there, but if you want to play that game, that's the only thing that was illegal, is those specific items. And so, frankly, because lye and sodium hydroxide and ascorbic acid and everything else that was involved in the process, none of that is inherently illegal and can be used for other things other than the extraction. You should have given all of that back as well. But you seem to have it in your head that now you're going to do the extractions or something. I don't know what exactly you think you're doing, but that's the only conclusion I can draw, because then I sent a letter to a lawmaker in Fairfax, or one of the associated people with the lawmakers in Fairfax, about legalizing the substance and not shutting down the programs. And what happens almost exactly after that? A huge raid in Maryland, which is where one of the packages came from. So you ignored what I said, and you just went ahead and did the opposite, and then didn't get back to me after that. Then you stopped responding to me. You said you'd look into it, and then you stopped responding to me after you did that. So it becomes very clear to me at this point that all you're doing is you wanted to do what I was doing. You didn't like that I had that power, that ability, and so you took it away from me for yourself because you're selfish. And you used force. And then you kind of basically just straight up denied that you used that force because you knew it was wrong. That's what this looks like. And it looks like you were hoping that I would have other drugs on me, or lethal weapons, unauthorized lethal weapons, and that you're going to get to fucking shoot me. That's exactly what this looks like. And you didn't say anything about the CIA documents. Anything else? Do I need to say anything else about this situation? Let me put it very clearly to you as well. My family comes from, my father was not like a federal, like army employee, but he did do some contracting, some important medical contracting and such, and training contracting with the parish as well. And he had a criminology degree and an education degree. He had a master's degree. The only reason he didn't get his PhD is because he wanted to go work instead of continuing to study. Pretty much the same thing for my mom. She has, economical and legal background. And it's like, before that, my grandfather was a comms officer in the Army, and he was flying the Hump in World War II. I don't want to go into too much details. And he even contributed to the moon landing. He was a programmer for the moon landing. So I don't know if you people understand that when you allowed me to use the federal mail system and the federal internet to purchase this substance, that's called a federal clearance. Especially with the initiative involved. That is a federal clearance. And before that, my great-grandfather was a captain in the Army for World War I as a Signal Corps officer. So when you take my equipment away from me, basically under false pretenses, not false pretenses that I was ordering the MHRB in the first place, but it seemed like you thought I was going to have a bunch of crack cocaine on me or something. That's what it really seemed like. And it's probably because I left a comment on a YouTube video about how Germany was having a crack epidemic and how they had safe use centers. And I suggested that they make dimethyltryptamine available so that they can have a more, even if they're addicted to crack, that they can still recover from it and have a substance that helps them with the addiction. I think that's really why, paired with the fact that I ordered a set of Yamaha HS8s from China, because I learned about the supply system, and I used to use those for a project which I never properly got compensated for, and frankly, which I was abused over. And so I figured, I earned this. I can order it for a lesser price from the factory because the rest of the price factored in is supposed to be for the supply chain, right? That's the only reason that there's a price markup. But if I don't need to use that supply chain, I shouldn't have to pay the rest of the price. And it was available, and then they, quote unquote, the common theme here is customs. They said they held the package at customs through Volt, and that they kept asking for more money. At first they asked for $200 more or whatever. And then, okay, so I paid that, and then they're like, okay, well actually now we need $700 more on top of that to reach the full price. No, you fucking don't. So I said, just keep the money, do the right thing. You made it impossible for me to challenge this. I think they took it as a fucking threat and said, let's fuck this kid's life up. Also, before that, after I got out of detention from Howard County, which was 7 months, and then 2 months in an inpatient facility, I offered, because things were crazy because of COVID, I offered to volunteer with the SWAT team, with SWAT and hazmat stuff. And they said, oh, well, you can't do this unless you've been on the force for 15 years. Okay, explain to me my family history then. If I'm not inherently part of this situation that you're talking about, albeit from a different perspective, then explain to me what's really going on here. Somehow we seem to have shifted to a completely separate system than what my previous paternal or any of my previous iterations of my family were involved in. And explain to me why in Fairfax County this police station says U.S. Army National Guard on it instead of Virginia State Police. Just asking. I would like to know the answer to that. So instead of, accepting my offer or just saying we just don't need that help right now, you decided to fucking haze me. Or whatever. It's terrorism. It's a lot of things. Assassination attempt, conspiracy to commit murder, police entrapment, scam. It's a police scam. I don't know if Trump himself was involved in this process or if it was just a shift that occurred at the same time as his, the raid occurred at the same time as his election. But it's just a bunch of fucking corruption and people fucking beating their meat or whatever and saying, I'm right and you're wrong now because everyone agrees. And when nobody fucking agrees. Everyone agreed on is that this shit's not as dangerous as people made it seem, and it's actually really helpful for people who have PTSD and treatment-resistant depression. And everyone agrees that pharmaceutical companies don't cover the fucking board entirely because they can only patent things that are non-natural substances. So you use words like synthesis, make it seem like it's not natural. Okay, the synthesis is that a salt compound bonded to the tryptamine through an aqueous solution. That's the synthesis. You're all fucking liars. Even if you tell some of the truth, it's just absolutely insane. And once again, my point isn't to try to put you down and make you, I want you to take my words into consideration and how I feel about this and honestly look at your situation. But I'm telling you, I want you to figure it out. I want you to realize that I'm right and be better. Even if you can't make all your changes at once because the system is corrupt and you're in a corrupt system, I want you to make decisions that align more with what's right when you can. That's all I'm asking. And I want you to leave me alone when it comes to this sort of stuff, because every single charge that you have against me, when you put it in real context, is complete and utter bullshit, and it's just you motherfuckers trying to cover up your mistakes and blaming me. And that's dishonorable as fuck in a system that is supposed to rely entirely on the honor system. That's why they call the judge your honor. You understand? And so I don't care what your quote-unquote argument is from those perspectives. If you want to have a reasonable conversation with me for once, that would be different. But that's not what's happened in any of these situations. As a Stewart, I take personal offense to this situation because you're using a system, a role in society which is supposed to protect and serve. And what do Stewarts do? They protect and they serve. Okay, so you're basically mocking me. You're using my own name against me and mocking me. And the circumcision also impacted my health negatively. And I need help recovering from that instead of being fucking mocked about that too. I didn't ask for that, and my parents were under the impression it was pretty much medically necessary because the culture was different back then. I was raised Christian, and you know what Christ was? He was someone who applied salvation. My family came over on the Mayflower, some of it. Obviously, I'm mixed. My skin's pale now, but if you put me out in the sun for a while, I turn brown. And I have a lot of other different, heritages. But some of my family came over on the Mayflower to practice Christianity without being persecuted, just like I am now. This is a Christian endeavor. And if you do enough research on this, you'll find out that this chemical is associated with connection to a higher power. It's part of my religion. It's literally part of my religion. Even if they didn't tell us that in the Bible, because the facts are obscured once again and the translation wasn't complete, it's literally part of Christianity. And it's really upsetting to me that this has all happened. And, but I'm also aware of the greater context that, people have been getting killed over this stuff. Not even just this, just people in general have been getting killed over the drug trade, which should not be illicit across the board so that people can gatekeep. Excuse me, my alarm's going off. It must be 4:20. 4:20! Yes, I have a sense of humor. Kind of. Yes, I do. Actually, yeah, it's not even kind of. I'm just being self-deprecating when I say that. Anyway, long story short is I understand that the context is very serious. This is a very serious situation. And that, like, my perspective on this is that if you were going to if it was so serious that you needed to raid me with a SWAT team, you should have just shot me and killed me, because you left me with a very serious problem and made my life way, way worse. And that's crime. And you might just say, no, it isn't, because you're worthless, Stuart, and you're just a fucking psychopathic retard who is crazy and all this shit. But you people are just being assholes. You know full well that I'm correct. And if you don't know that, you should probably, do a little more research. And this isn't supposed to become a fucking, dick swinging competition or like a me against you thing. That's not what this is supposed to be. We were supposed to be cooperating and you turned it against me. And I have no interest in making it a competition. Although I would like you to understand that the type of ways that you've hurt me, if you really realistically don't just go, well, that doesn't apply to me. If you really realistically apply that same, mindset to yourself from an outside perspective, doesn't reflect well on you. That's what I'm getting at, is that if you level the playing field, you people don't have any authority over me. You call your authority writing this shit down, but you don't actually know what the fuck you're doing. And if you do, you're abusing that power. That's my point. I don't want to go over this over and over and over and over and over again, and I'm sure that I will be talking about this again in the future. But I just wanted to get to this point right now, because I've also made some content that's a lot more inflammatory, a lot more triggered, and you need more context, if you didn't have it already, to understand why I'm behaving like that, so that you don't just think that I'm some fucking idiot who's just pissed off because he lost something or did something wrong. I was trying to get away with something. No, I wasn't trying to get away with something. You people set up an avenue for me to complete this, and then you took it back and blamed me. And that's not right. That's the whole point here. So I'm going to bring this video to a close because I accidentally split it. I have to go run it through an editing program as well to put it back into one video. But it's not that big of a deal. It's just a little bit of extra time. And I have time, So I hope you, at some level, understand where I'm coming from with this. And I want you to understand the only reason I'm not continuing to do the extractions is because I was basically asked not to. They asked in a very rude way. And it wasn't really asking. But nobody had asked me not to. Nobody had brought it up with me before that. The whole reason I started doing the extractions at home was, like I said, because of the cost and because I wasn't sure what was in it or where it came from. That's all. That's all it was. And yeah, I live 15 minutes outside of DC. Big fucking whoop. Why has it changed so much? And we already know the answer. It's because of, jurisdictional. There's no reasonable answer to this from a fair perspective. It's just people trying to money grab and gatekeep. Anyway, like I said, if you disagree with me, you clearly misunderstood the entire premise. And if you're just continuing to disagree with me after that, you're just being arbitrarily oppositional defiant, and you probably should get an autism checkup. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just being honest. You really should consider that potentially your perspective is biased and limited. And I will leave it at that. One more thing I realized I need to add to this video for it to make sense is I stopped when I was explaining that I gave the dimethyltryptamine extraction away a couple times. And then I had mentioned that I accepted some payment from someone who wouldn't say, they just wouldn't accept it for free. It was not a lot. It was like $60 for like, some portion of a gram of the dimethyltryptamine. I just wanted to clarify that. And maybe like another 40 another time, but it was like 2 times, and like didn't even pay for the full, or like maybe paid for a package that I had used, and I gave a full extraction away also. So not only did I not make any money off of it, I didn't even break even on, and distribution was not my goal. There were some specific people that I encountered that I thought understood where I was coming from and would also benefit from it, and I was sharing. As far as I know, the feedback I received was that it was not only not toxic, but was very, very helpful to them. So, and like it was those limited situations. So I just wanted to clarify that, because I had mentioned that I had accepted money at some point when someone wouldn't they wouldn't accept it for free, even though they needed it. And I always say, even if your doctor's corrupt, you should still consult them. I'm not trying to supplant your doctor, but it's no secret to me, at least, that the medical industry is not being completely honest about some things, and they don't always have your best interest in mind. But that you should still try to find a licensed doctor that you trust, because even if the system is corrupt, that doesn't mean that everyone isn't doing the right thing. Even if there's some corruption involved, you should still try to find a legitimate support system. That was never my point. My point wasn't down with America. No, my point was kind of, Trump's point is make America great again, but obviously he's got this viewpoint that isn't necessarily very helpful in a lot of cases. It might be helpful to him specifically to fight people off, but it's not necessarily an actually representative viewpoint of what is actually good for America. Whereas I actually want not just America, but the rest of the world to flourish and survive. But it can't happen if there's so much corruption. That's it. So I'll leave it there. I thought of another thing. I'm going to give myself some grace here while I elucidate it. It's also possible that they were running a fentanyl operation or something similar in this area, and they didn't want me to be able to help people get off of it because they wanted to keep them addicted and then have them die of an overdose and take their assets. And another consideration is that, after my master tracks were taken, I didn't get to make any money off my music. I made a total of like over a couple of years, $2,000 in streaming revenue. That wasn't even just off mine. It was off some engineering stuff I did too. That barely covers the fucking Juul pods that I was using. Now, I did all the work myself. So, and like I said, I don't want to get anyone in trouble, but when I asked my attorney to, help me get my lab notebook back, because the logical fallacy, it's my property, he said he couldn't do it without filing a motion because the prosecutor wouldn't release it. And then he said he needed a new fee because it wasn't related to the prior representation. It's the same case. So it's 100% the same, related to the same representation. I don't have a source of income. It's just extortion. It's the same thing that Volt Company was doing. All comes full circle. They're all just criminals. And you got to take the silver lining where you can get it. But at the same time, it's really worth noting that that's what's really going on.